our freedom, our sense of being able to really be at home, to feel at ease, is inextricably all connected. We are all impacted by suffering that exists in the world. How do we hold that? And how can we come together to find ways to be able to transform it?
So my talk is on shifting conversations here in the United States about Israelis and Palestinians. Why do we have compassion for the people that we do? And who is missing from those conversations about compassion? Who's not being talked about in a compassionate way? Who's not being presented in an empathetic light? And why is that?
My talk is on the question, are we wired for compassion? The field of neuroscience and psychology have been looking into this question for the past couple of decades. We're actually finding that not only does it seem like we're wired for compassion, but we actually have a bias built in for compassion.
When we can first begin to really sense and feel ourselves as being recipients of care, that really helps us to begin to connect with our own capacities to feel care for others.
And I came across a poem in Arabic called Rivers. And it took me a while, and then I realized that's Langston Hughes, written in Arabic. Palestinians everywhere have found a deep resonance with the experiences of Black Americans. So part of my research has been uncovering that history, and I'm excited to share it with the Downtown Lecture Series audience.
Very recently, some researchers at Princeton University actually found that if you think about removing pain or lessening that person's suffering, you actually get reward centers lighting up in your brain. You're hardwired for this, but there are certain things you can do to train it. So my talk will have a sprinkling of different types of practices that you can do and things that you might not be thinking of as compassion training. So going to the homeless shelter, for example, and giving some of your time, that's a compassion training.
Wow. Hey, everyone. My name is J.P. Jones. I'm the Don Bennett Moon Dean of the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, the University of Arizona's People College, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 9th Annual Downtown Lecture Series. It's also a real buzz to be back live, on stage, not on Zoom. Over the years, thousands of you have come to support us as we have had lecture series on everything from happiness to food to animals, and we're just delighted to be here tonight, where our topic is compassion. We have 4 brilliant speakers to talk about what, from their perspective, compassion is and means. And they'll cover spirituality and mindfulness. They'll cover psychology and cognitive science, social conflict and public opinion, and racial justice and transformation. Why compassion is kind of an obvious answer. Over the past 18 months, we have all been essentially in a collective trauma, and compassion can tend to that, and so that's why we selected it. I think people look out at compassion and they think they know it when they see it. However, it's both complex and dynamic. It's potentially innate and learned and learnable. And the faculty that we have are going to address many different dimensions, from the spiritual and emotional and affective and intellectual and biochemical and social and political registers. So it's going to be a great series, and I think we're going to come away with some tools to help us be more compassionate and to build a more compassionate world. Thank you all for being here. And I have some people to thank, and I want to start with Bonnie Schock of the Fox Tucson Theater. It's the place where we first started the Downtown Lecture Series. We're very happy to be back, and we thank the theater for its tenacity, temerity around keeping us all healthy, but also reopening, and we're very grateful that the theater invited us back this October. We have a series sponsor, which is the Stonewall Foundation Fund, and I'm very grateful to Bill and Rick and Kathleen Small for their contribution to the series so that this could happen. The foundation, for over 30 years, has put over $15 million in the hands of art, educational, and health nonprofits in our community, and that's quite a gift to our community. Thank you. Our supporting sponsors include Mike and Beth Kasser and Hello Walua Companies, and of course, they're very well known in philanthropic circles here in Tucson, and this is the 4th straight year that they've supported us. And wherever you are, Mike and Beth, thank you very much for your support. Additionally, Tucson Medical Center Healthcare, they started with us in happiness, and they stayed with us in topics like food and now compassion. Anything where wellness is of an issue, we know we can go to them for their support, so we thank them as well. And then 4 really wonderful friends of me and the college, Rowena Gary Medina and Roy Medina, and Joanne Ellison and Dr. Barbara Starrett, long supporters of the college, and we're very grateful for them for supporting this series. And then not last, Jeff and Tiana Ronstadt and our media sponsor, Tucson Lifestyle. So another, if you don't mind, big hand for all the sponsors. You're in for a real treat tonight. A talk by my colleague Leslie Langbert, who's the co-founder in 2014 and the executive director of the Center for Compassion Studies in the College of SBS. Leslie is a licensed clinical social worker, and she has spent over 20 years leading caring profession organizations and also doing psychotherapy for individuals. She has worked with scores of community organizations across the country, particularly in Tucson and in New York and in Washington, D.C. area and in Florida, as well as advising and working with universities such as Michigan State, Penn State, Emory, and Wisconsin. In Tucson and through the Compassion Center, she organizes and teaches courses and provides trainings in mindfulness, in yoga therapy, and in CBCT, which is cognitively based compassion training, which is a secularized contemplative practice that arises out of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. In this work, she helps people relieve stress, anxiety, depression, and deal with burnout. She helps them practice safe wellness and helps them recover from substance abuse. And she also helps people deal with grief and loss and physical and emotional trauma. At the U of A, she teaches courses in mindfulness to students, including a course on the mindful semester for undergraduate students in pursuit of student success, and also courses on self-care for people who are in the helping professions through the School of Sociology. She offers regular classes on campus in the evenings for faculty, staff, and students, anyone who wants to come and learn about mindful practices. She works with Native students in the Pasquayaki school system. She works with members of the military at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. She works with youth groups and parents here in southern Arizona. And she works with members of the adult community as well as the behavioral health professionals who are trying to assist them. And if you're interested in following up with Leslie, she is teaching through our community classroom a course on courageous compassion, which begins on October 19th, and I understand there's still some places available in that course. I doubt there will be very many tomorrow, but if you're interested, please go to communityclassroom.arizona.edu. And thank you all for bravely coming out to the Fox Theater. Leslie?
Thank you, JP, for inviting me to share this talk tonight. Thank you to all of you for coming down to the beautiful Fox Theater. It feels good to be back after some time being away, doesn't it? And I'd like to extend a warm welcome and a thank you to all of our friends that are watching this via live stream and online. It's wonderful to be with you again. I'd like to actually invite us in all together by sort of settling with a mindful grounding moment. So I'll invite you to take a nice, comfortable seat. It may feel good to bring your feet both flat to the floor and let your spine be long. It may feel good to allow your eyes to gently close or to just gently drop your gaze. And taking a moment here to arrive in your space, letting your awareness drop from your thinking mind into the body, noticing the sensation of groundedness in your body. That may be most vivid in the soles of your feet or the backs of your legs and sitting bones in your seat. Just letting your body relax a little more deeply into the stability and support underneath you. And then guiding your awareness to your breath, and notice your breath in your abdomen. And notice how with each inhale that the body very gently expands from the front and the back. And with your next inhale, allowing your awareness to expand a little further, to become aware of your neighbor in front of you and behind you. And sensing into the breath in the abdomen, now noticing with an inhale how your breath expands the body gently on each side. And letting your awareness expand to include your neighbors on your left and your right. And then guiding your awareness again into that sensation of groundedness. Sensing into the literal common ground that we all share. And taking a moment to acknowledge those who have come before you on this land. And a moment to remember those who are not able to be with us in the body tonight. Our friends, our family, our neighbors who have become ancestors. and are supporting and perhaps guiding us now from somewhere just beyond our view. Taking a moment to send them the wish of love and protection as they continue on their journey, and perhaps calling in that love and protection for us as we continue on ours. And taking a moment to return awareness again to the breath, to the sensation of groundedness in the body. And very gently, as you're ready, gently lifting your gaze and opening your eyes. Welcome, friends. Tonight, I'd like to invite us in to explore compassion and care more deeply together. Each of the speakers in this series coming after me are going to offer fascinating science behind how we experience compassion, compelling perspectives that may challenge or perhaps even shift your own perspective about who is deserving of compassion, and leave us much to practice and contemplate long after this series ends. But I'd like to begin the series tonight by offering a framing for both why and how it's important for us to deepen our capacities for compassion now. Because our current situation demands it. Our lives and the very life of our planet depends upon it. We all have seen evidence and examples of those who act selflessly and compassionately, becoming overwhelmed, burned out, and so disconnected from care themselves as they become further caught in a myth that looms large in our society, the myth of the hero helper. This myth tells us that those who help others don't need help themselves, and that to need help implies weakness, incompetence, perhaps even moral failure. The costs of this myth are incalculable harms to our collective well-being. Our nation's school teachers are experiencing such alarming rates of depletion and burnout that nearly 50% of them are leaving the profession within the first 5 years. In 2020, year one of the COVID-19 pandemic, more than 75% of our nation's healthcare workers described experiencing substantial symptoms of burnout. 80% of them described experiencing symptoms of depression. Our nation's physicians are dying by suicide at rates twice that of the general public. The climate crisis is also fueling a mental health crisis among our nation's wildlands firefighters. While the risks to health and safety on the job are increasing, along with the prevalence, intensity, and scope of wildlands fires driven by climate change, those who are tracking informal data estimate that wildlands firefighters are dying by suicide at rates 30 times that of the general public. Our society can no longer afford to see compassion as the work of a relative few. And we can no longer see compassion as anything other than essential for our survival. I'd like to take a moment to just describe what I mean when I'm using the terms care and compassion. Compassion is often described as the recognition of suffering, coupled with a heartfelt desire to alleviate it. Compassion requires awareness, courage, motivation, and action. To feel compassion is part of what it means to be human. It's that very natural desire that we have to want to maintain a sense of deep contentment and ease, and to experience joy, and to be free of suffering, and to be free of pain. And it also includes wanting to hold the wish for others to flourish as well, to help create the conditions for mutual flourishing and avoidance of pain. Compassion arises through a combination of skills, insight, and wisdom that all together allow us to be aware of and responsive to suffering and injustice at all levels of our relationships. Our relationship with ourselves, our relationships with each other, the relationships that we hold in organizations and systems, our relationships with society and with the planet at large. The compassion programs and practices that we share in the Center for Compassion Studies have their roots in Tibetan Buddhism, but they're also supported by research and theory from the fields of social psychology, neuroscience, cognitive science, and others. These practices that come from ancient traditions have been adapted to be accessible by all, regardless of one's religious or spiritual affiliation, and even regardless if one has a particular religious or spiritual affiliation. They have been adapted to be accessible for anyone who has a sincere interest in wanting to deepen and explore their capacities to experience compassion and to act more compassionately. Tonight, I'm drawing from a few frameworks and ways that we understand how we can develop and expand the quality of compassion in each of the different attributes of it. Among them include CBCT, Cognitively Based Compassion Training, developed by Lobsang Tenzin Nagy at Emory University, Sustainable Compassion Training, developed by John McCransky at Boston College, the work of Courage of Care Coalition, as led by Brooke Dodson-Lavelle and her team, and the work of Self-Compassion, developed by Kristen Neff at the University of Texas at Austin. In addition to these leaders who have adapted Buddhist practices to be accessible for all, I'm also drawing from one of the first teachers for many of us who grew up during the 1970s and the 1990s, the inimitable Mr. Rogers, and teachings from the neighborhood he welcomed all of us into. During much of the quarantine period, last year and into this year, perhaps like you, I felt really drawn to want to hear and receive voices of wisdom, a supportive, caring presence, and also guidance for how to navigate these times. And I found myself over and over being drawn back to one of the most prominent voices of calming, steady presence and wisdom from my childhood, the voice of Mr. Rogers. So as I listened to interviews that he gave throughout his life, talks that he delivered for various audiences, yes, I even watched archived episodes of The Neighborhood, and listened to the outstanding podcast by Carvel Wallace, Finding Fred. I was struck by how so much of Mr. Rogers' message, and even more than that, really his life was the very embodiment of compassion. And so I'm weaving tonight some of his words through as a thread that many of us will find hopefully familiar and welcoming. How does it feel for you when you experience compassion in the body? Take a moment to bring to mind a time when you felt or you acted compassionately. It may have been what felt like a relatively simple act. Offering a listening ear to a friend, or offering your encouragement and support to someone experiencing doubt or uncertainty. Maybe tending to someone who wasn't feeling well. Perhaps it was an act that required a substantial amount of risk and courage, such as responding to an injustice. Or perhaps it's even the very bedrock of your life's work, extending care to others, serving as a healer in some way. Just take a moment to notice in your body what you feel when you bring to mind that moment or that act of compassion. And notice what you feel in the body. Perhaps there's a sense of warmth. Maybe you recall an extra sense of alertness or sensing into strength, physical, spiritual, emotional. Compassion ignites a fire within, and that fire can create warmth for others, and it can help keep our own hearts warm as long as we understand how to cultivate and tend to it so that it doesn't burn out and so that it doesn't become misdirected and drive us into action impulsively that inadvertently creates further harm where we're seeking to alleviate it. Now, you may wonder, how can compassion cause harm? So let me be clear, compassion itself does not create harm. But we must be clear about our intentions and our motivations to alleviate suffering so that when we extend that care, when we extend that action, it's coming from a place of full seeing, full awareness, and is actually attending to the needs of those who are suffering rather than being an impulsive act that really is seeking to alleviate our own distress or our own discomfort. Feeling compassion for those that we like and we care about comes relatively easily, right? We sense virtually no hesitation in wanting to help alleviate the suffering of those that we hold dear. Our friends, our family, those that we identify with in some way. But compassion becomes a little bit more difficult to access when we begin to think about strangers or people that we don't have strong feelings for one way or another. And compassion can become even more difficult to access when we think about people that we don't agree with. People whose behaviors and actions maybe generate feelings of frustration, anger, perhaps even disgust. When we bring to mind people who have harmed us or have harmed others we care about, compassion frequently becomes very restricted. Evolutionary biologists and psychologists make compelling arguments for compassion as a trait that humans are born with. They remind us that our very survival as a species is dependent upon having this trait. Those of you who have been up at all hours of the night attending to your infant children while your own needs were prioritized much lower down the list likely resonate with the wisdom in this. Compassion as a trait involves the instinctual reaction to want to alleviate the suffering of those that we hold most dear to us, those within our most inner circle, our immediate family, our friends that we hold dear, and those that we look at and have a sense of immediate identification with them as being like us. The psychologists and some philosophers and spiritual leaders across the globe and throughout time have also recognized that compassion is a skill that we can cultivate and expand to widen our circle of care, to become more inclusive, to bring in those beyond just our immediate family, our immediate friends, beyond the immediate surface identifications of like me. And clearly, in such difficult times, we must find ways not only to be able to deepen our capacities to expand compassion to a greater number of people, but we must develop ways to be able to deepen our capacities for compassion and care so that we can extend them sustainably for the long haul. One of our first steps in being able to cultivate compassion, because compassion is deeply relational, right? Just as we are hardwired to experience compassion, we're also hardwired for cooperation and social connection. And being able to sense into the connections that we have with others and being able to deepen them is one of the key first steps for us in being able to expand and widen the circle of care. In order for us to be a welcoming, caring presence for others, we must first recognize ourselves as being worthy of care and also recognizing the ways in which we continually receive care and compassion and support. Because deep within us, no matter who we are, there lives a feeling of wanting to be lovable, of wanting to be the kind of person that other people like to be with. And the greatest thing that we can do is to let people know that they are loved and capable of loving. When we sense into these connections of care, when we bring forward moments when we recall being in the presence of another who welcomes us just as we are and gives us a sense or a feeling of being at home, being at ease. You know, a moment when we have been fully received as we are. This is a really powerful piece for us that psychologists describe as priming for secure attachment. And when we are securely attached, we feel a sense of confidence that when we run into challenges and difficulties in our lives, that we can successfully meet those challenges by being able to access our own inner resources, as well as feeling that there are others that we can rely on if we need help, if we need support. We literally sense into, having people at our back. Young children in their early development cultivate this sense of secure attachment through the actual physical proximity of a caregiver, right? When we watch young kids, we see how, when they're getting ready to take a risk, right, and kind of step out of their comfort zone, coming up with the courage to try something new, that when they look and they can physically lay eyes on someone that they feel is reliable and trustworthy, that there's a sense of confidence, and I can try this out, and I know that I'm not alone. And researchers have found that as adults, that we can cultivate that same sense of secure attachment by simply bringing to mind the memory of a moment that we've been cared for that we felt seen, that we felt a connection, that we could rely on support. And we also can do this by bringing to mind and sensing that we have with us those who represent these very qualities that we want to cultivate within ourselves. We refer to them as stable, caring figures. They may or may not have ever been personally known to us. But when we think about them and their life that they've lived, they are the embodiment of compassion and full acceptance and seeing, right? And when we sense into these moments of care, as we cultivate secure attachment, one of the other things that's really interesting that researchers have found is that when we feel securely attached, we're much more likely to help others. And conversely, if we are insecurely attached, if for whatever reason, if we are not able to sense into the support and care of others, if we feel that we're somehow going it alone when things are difficult for us, when we encounter challenge, our focus becomes more inward. Our bandwidth is prioritized around our own self-protection, and we are much less likely to help others. When we sense into these moments of care, connection, and support, when we work with this as a continual practice, it reminds us that we are not alone in our successes or our disappointments. Mr. Rogers used to often invite audiences to join him in remembering those who have loved us into being, whether they are near or far, or have become ancestors. And this is a practice that is found in many different traditions. It's a way of remembering and calling forward all of those who have supported us to become who we are today. We work with several different practices in our compassion programs. Those of you that have practiced with me are familiar with how we bring in a moment of care and connect with that. And at other times, we call in an entire field of care. Tonight, I want to invite you into the practice with me of bringing forward a moment of care. So I'll invite you right now just to allow your mind to bring forward naturally any moment from any time in your life. Could have happened earlier tonight or early in your childhood or any time in between. A simple moment that you felt seen, that you felt at home in the presence of another being. You felt a sense of ease. This may be as simple as the memory of watching a sunset or a sunrise with someone dear to you, or sharing a laugh together. It may be the memory of when someone taught you something that stayed with you, and you felt that you were in their full presence receiving that. It may have been a time that someone perhaps that you didn't even know very well surprised you and just sat alongside if you were moving through something difficult. Take a moment to allow that memory to come forward. And just as we began this evening, I'll invite you again, if it feels comfortable for you, to again bring your feet flat to the floor. Sometimes it can help us to access that memory by allowing our eyes to gently close or just dropping the gaze to allow it to be soft, bringing your awareness back into the memory of this moment. Allow it to be as vivid as possible. And as you recall this moment of care, of connection, perhaps seeing in your mind the colors and textures of the environment around you. Maybe you're able to recall scents or sounds. And now guiding your awareness to notice the proximity of this being to you. They may be at your back, at your side. They may be in front of you. Perhaps you're being held in their embrace. Noticing how it feels in the body to be present with them in this moment. As they offer you their full presence, they're deeply wishing you well. They're taking joy in just simply being with you in this moment. Notice where in your body you feel this care. And noticing if there's any part of you that may be resistant to receiving this care or wonders if you're worthy. And if there's any part of you that's not sure, invite that part just to come along with you to receive. Every part of you welcome. Sensing into the qualities of care that this being embodies and is extending to you now. Perhaps generosity, warmth, maybe there's a sense of listening, a deep acceptance, or a feeling of safeness. Let these qualities envelop and permeate your entire being. Just allowing yourself to gently steep in these qualities. And as they infuse your body, noticing how these qualities already exist within you. And as you connect with them deeply now, they remind you of your capacities to deepen and expand them so that you can extend these similar qualities of care to others and to yourself in times of difficulty. and hardship. And gently allowing this caring figure with you to gently fade. Still holding these qualities and that feeling with you. Guiding awareness back into your body, into the breath, or the feeling of groundedness in your seat. And as you're ready, gently lifting your gaze, opening your eyes. I want to invite you to take a moment just to notice and observe what your experience was with this brief moment of care practice. Some of us may have found that we were able to drop in right away and really immerse in these qualities of care. Some of us may have found that there's a little bit of resistance or struggle in the beginning, but we got there and we dropped in. And some of us may have found that we noticed challenge and resistance and even some difficulty, and found that our mind was racing to try to bring forward a moment of care, and we felt like we couldn't do it. And maybe felt so frustrated that we told ourselves, I don't have any moments of care in my life to bring forward. Or maybe you wondered if there's something wrong with you. I want to assure you that if that was your experience, first of all, you're not alone. And secondly, there's not anything wrong with you. This is actually quite natural, happens for a lot of us when we're beginning to work with this practice. Often what happens if we notice a sense of resistance to this practice initially is because our protective strategies that our mind employs makes it easier for us to access the moments when we felt let down, when we've been disappointed, or when those that we relied on for care didn't meet our expectations in some way, or perhaps we felt hurt. And so we're working with cultivating, bringing these moments of care and connection forward to help us to access them more easily. From birth, we've all received innumerable moments of care and compassion from others. We are quite literally held in a web of care throughout our lives. Quite literally, none of us would be here tonight if we had not been the recipients of innumerable moments of care and compassion from those both known and those unknown to us. But in order for us to be able to expand and deepen our capacities for compassion, it's really crucial for us to begin to soften the blocks that we have toward receiving care and recognizing ourselves as recipients of care. When we sense into the ways in which we're held in care, when we sense into how, as we are welcomed, right? We are seen. It helps us to actually strengthen our internal ground to be able to begin to work with our difficult experiences and our difficult emotions with vulnerability that we recognize as a strength rather than as a weakness. How do you work with difficult emotions? Emotions like fear and anger, sadness, worry. I mean, if you're anything like me, you're not welcoming these emotions with open arms, right? We often have strategies that we use that include trying to avoid difficult situations, kind of pretending like they're not there, like hoping maybe if we don't look at them, they'll go away. Or we distract from them. We have a million different ways that we distract from discomfort and difficult emotions. And sometimes we find that we judge ourselves for having difficult and painful experiences. And we judge ourselves for experiencing the very natural emotions that go along with those experiences. We may even shame ourselves for having these difficult experiences and feelings. And, these strategies might work for us in some contexts and for a short period of time. But after a while, what we realize is that rather than working with our emotions, we're reacting to them. And when we react to them impulsively, we also see that we're often adding additional suffering onto our experience. And sometimes what happens is in that impulsivity and reacting, we're creating more suffering for others too. And then that keeps us in that cycle of avoidance, distraction, judgment. So we have to find ways to be able to work with the very natural experience of being human and working through not only difficult situations, but the emotions that go along with that. We need to be able to cultivate a sense of self-compassion. And when we sense into these moments that we've been held in care, it reminds us that we are welcomed in a sense of full acceptance. And that we don't have to show up all the time with a facade or show up leaving parts of ourselves out. When we love a person, we accept them exactly as is. The lovely with the unlovely, the strong along with the fearful, the true mixed in with the facade. And of course, we can't do this unless we accept ourselves that way. Kristin Neff offers us a really powerful framework to help us learn how to cultivate self-compassion, how to learn how to be with the fullness of our experience. The first step she invites us into is to hold our experience in mindful awareness. So often when we encounter difficulty, when we experience painful emotions, we tend to really over-identify with what's happening, and we also over-identify with what we're feeling. And what it looks like when we kind of over-identify with the situation is we get either caught up in a story, or we have one thought that's difficult, and then we add on a whole series of other thoughts that may be these what-if scenarios. I like to call that riding the train to catastrophe land. Anybody get on that train too? I do it all the time. It's a practice to learn how to let me step off and just watch this happening. Yeah? And when we over-identify with our emotions, we lose sight of being able to see that our emotions and our experience is temporary, right? So we begin to think that if we're feeling sadness, for example, that we are sad, right? Like we are totally the sadness. And when we step into mindful awareness, we're creating space. We're creating space to disengage from this. So it's this ability to make the shift from, for example, I am a disappointment because this happened, to I feel disappointed because this happened. And when we create that space, it gives us the ability to be able to see the situation from all different angles. And it also gives us the ability to recognize more clearly that there are many, many different factors that all contribute to any given outcome. And so many of those factors are outside of our control. Because often when we run into difficulty, when we make mistakes, when painful experiences happen to us, if we do things that embarrass us, which I do all the time, we can get in this place of deep self-criticism. Our inner vision becomes really narrow. And being able to see the experience from a place where we are a little bit more disengaged rather than really in it and adding on all of the additional thoughts supports us. The second piece is to treat ourselves with kindness. You know, when we experience painful situations, one of the things that happens is our protective strategies, that want to keep us from getting hurt. This shows up as our inner self-critic. And our inner dialogue can get really harsh. And when we pause and we notice that, and we're like, wow, I would never say this to someone I care about if they were going through a similar situation, right? When we cultivate a sense of self-kindness, we're working with these very qualities that we identified in the caring moment. This is our compassionate self within us, and we invite our compassionate self to have more of the floor in our head, right? So coming alongside us the way that a good friend would, telling us the truth, but also offering us encouragement for how we might be able to learn from the situation, reminding us too that what we're feeling isn't permanent, and that the difficulty, the mistake, whatever the difficulty is that's happening, doesn't define who we are. The third piece of this is sensing into our common humanity. Often when we experience painful situations, we develop a sense of isolation. We tell ourselves stories that no one else can possibly understand how difficult this is, And in doing that, we begin to turn away from this web of support that's around us, or we don't lean into it in the ways that it's available for us. And when we sense into common humanity, it helps us to recognize that every human feels the same range of emotions. Even if we don't know someone who's gone through what we're going through in exactly the same way or at the exact same time, we can hold on to that throughout human history, there are people that have been through a similar situation, and they have been able to heal and move through it. And part of our role in this collective web of care is that if we have the courage and the vulnerability to be with and work with our experiences, we can be a welcoming, caring, supportive presence for others when they are suffering, rather than when we encounter that to feel overwhelmed by it and turn away. There are parables from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that really illustrate common humanity and calling us into care so beautifully, but I'd like to share with you how I first learned about this before I was introduced to compassion practices. I'm offering it to you tonight because I sense that there are many who maybe are experiencing something similar. And I've had the gifts of time, dear supportive friends and family, and compassion practices that have all helped to support me on my journey of healing. Nearly 17 years ago, my beloved husband Steve died of melanoma. He was just 37 years old. We had been married just 2 weeks shy of our 4-year wedding anniversary when he died. And as you may be able to relate, my grief was enormous and exhausting. And at that time, in my early 30s, I didn't have friends around me who had been through a similar experience. In fact, several of my friends at that time were becoming parents for the first time. They were birthing new life into the world and didn't yet have a frame of reference for what it was like to help birth life over to the other side. And even though I had deeply supportive friends and family around me, I felt really isolated in my grief. And in that sense of isolation, I found ways to judge myself for Steve's death. Not that I caused it, but I found myself judging myself for not finding the right treatment in time to save his life. Grief is not always rational, is it? So one day, I was with a dear friend, an elder, who offered so much love and support and encouragement for me during that time and for a long time afterward. And I was just a few months into my grieving, and in that conversation that day, she could sense my sense of isolation and also understood that that was adding additional suffering to my experience on top of the very natural pain of my grief. And she looked at me, and with great care, she said, "Leslie, pain that is new to you is old to someone else." I have carried that simple and profound teaching with me since. It reminds me of how, when we are reminded of our common humanity, that love is shared in community, and grief is healed in community, not on our own. I'm sharing this photo of an aspen forest with you to draw our awareness into one of the metaphors that the plant world has for us about our relationships with each other and with all beings on the planet. Aspens are considered a highly fire-adaptable tree. They're one of the first trees that come back in to renew a forest after a fire. They come in like a community, creating habitats for other beings in the forest and creating a sense of renewal and healing for the damaged land. The root systems of aspens are rhizomes. So rather than having independent, separate root systems just underneath the earth, they are interconnected in a vast network. And while they appear above the surface to be independent and separate, they are actually one living, thriving organism. And the health of each of these aspens is dependent upon the whole. Human relationships are primary in all of living. When the gusty winds blow and shake our lives, if we know that people care about us, we may bend with the wind, but we won't break. We need to call each other in to heal together. We must unlearn this myth of individualism and sense more deeply into the truth of our deep interconnectedness. We must cultivate ways to be able to recognize how we are continually held in care, find ways to be with our difficult experiences, our difficult emotions, and to call back these parts of ourselves that we have disconnected from, these parts of ourselves that we disallow, that we shame, that we judge. The more that we can sense in and feel ourselves in our wholeness, the better prepared we are to be able to see others in their wholeness and in their fullness. And we begin to sense more deeply into the recognition of when we see our own vulnerability and being caught in our reactions to painful emotions and difficult circumstances, we begin to recognize that this is the commonality that we all share. We all wish to be free of suffering, to maintain feelings of contentment and ease. And we often have misguided ways about trying to go about holding on to or maintaining that. When we see ourselves more clearly and hold ourselves in a sense of kindness, we are able to widen our circle of compassion, to be more inclusive, to be more full seeing of others. And when we expand our circle of compassion, it becomes more difficult for us to turn away or to be indifferent when we see suffering and pain. And we are further able to take action, to respond to injustice, to respond to suffering from a place that may be born from anger, but is rooted in love. This is deep work that we're being called into, and it is lifelong. We can expect to fall back into old patterns again and again and again along the way. We can expect that we're going to feel challenged to stay committed to doing this. We can expect that we are going to uncover old wounds that we never really gave a full opportunity to heal. Our collective well-being depends upon this. I want to let Mr. Rogers have the last word tonight. You don't ever have to do anything sensational for people to love you. When I say it's you I like, I'm talking about that part of you that knows that life is far more than anything that you could see or hear or touch. That part of you that allows you to stand for those things that without which humankind cannot survive. Love that conquers hate. Peace that rises triumphant over war. And justice that proves more powerful than greed. So in all that you do, in all of your life, I wish you the strength and the grace to make those choices which will allow you and your neighbor to become the best of whoever you are. Thank you for your full presence and your full attention.
I hope to see everyone next Wednesday night. Jay Sanguinetti from the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences Center for Consciousness Studies. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.